everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to finally get to do my February reading wrap-up. February was not the most reading heavy month for me. I finished 4 books and then my 5th book on the first day of March, but I'm going to include it in this wrap-up. So let's just get right into the books. First off, let's talk about the books that I have physically with me. So we have Abigail by Magda Szabo, translated by Len Rix. This was a book that I buddy read with Sarah from Hardcover Hearts. This was a fantastic buddy read, both in terms of I really enjoyed reading this together with her and the conversation we had around it. It was really good for discussion, but also the book itself is so fantastic. Magda Szabo is also the writer of The Door, which was how I came to be familiar with her. This is a book about a young woman or a girl called Gina who is sent off to boarding school, a religious boarding school, during the Second World War, and she is her father is a general, so she isn't quite aware of what is going on in the world. She just knows that she's being shipped off to this very cloistered environment that is completely different from everything that she is familiar with, everything she knows and feels safe in. So she is very resistant to this new environment. And this book follows her sort of right before she moves into the school, and then once she's there, all of her interaction with other students, her interactions with the teachers. I would say in general, Magda Szabo is really good with characters, but also so you get a very clear sense of Gina as an individual. You get to see, you understand her frustration with the situation she finds herself in. You can sympathize with her even when she's making possibly stupid decisions. It feels true to her age, as does the other students of the school. They behave their age. One of the things I love about her writing is that she's able to convey a lot through the absence of things. So not in a physical sense, but in the sense that what people don't say, what they hold back in their actions as well. So there's a lot of the showing rather than telling in her writing that makes her such a strong writer, that makes her an exceptional storyteller. And this is quite pacey in terms of that a lot happens in this book, and it's very dramatic at points. I just think it's fantastic and definitely gonna be one of my favorite books of the year. Next up we have Delirium by Restrepo, translated by Natascha Wimmer. This was another buddy read that I did with Mariana, who is one of my subscribers, and it was again a fantastic buddy reading experience, especially because we had very different backgrounds and contexts that we were coming to this book with. She gave me a lot of insight into the Latin American context, especially for this book. Basically, this book is about Augustina, who's a young woman going through some kind of mental breakdown when the book opens, and we see how her husband, Audre, is trying to understand what has led up to this point, what has made her what has caused this mental state. The rest of the book is told in different timelines. So we have Augustina's current situation and her husband dealing with this crisis, and then we have Augustina's past, so especially her childhood is another timeline. We have Augustina's grandparents' story, especially her grandfather. And then we also have another character, Maida's, that is introduced later into the book. So there's several different timelines, and it switches back and forth between them. And especially when you're starting the book, it's quite overwhelming because you don't really know how they fit together, how they relate to each other, why they are important. But it's becoming clearer the further you get into the book, the further you understand how they fit together and how they relate to Augustina's story. One of the things we talked about in connection with the buddy read was how families, how they inherit values, how they inherit lifestyles and sort of worldviews as well. The way that a family shape the kind of as I said, the kind of worldview the children have, but also how they live their lives and how some of the things they do, they don't necessarily question everything because it's the natural thing for them. There's a lot of exploration of mental illness, of course, because Augustina, as I said, is going through some kind of mental breakdown, and she definitely seems to be losing grasp of reality. Illusions and reality is sort of mixing together, which also is the way this book is written also sort of reflects her sense of confusion of what is real and what isn't. And it's interesting in that sense that, much like Abigail, the structural things to this book is interesting, as well as the story and the characters. Again, this was a really strong book. I think in particular the mental illness aspect and the family aspects is something that I tend to gravitate towards anyway, and I would be definitely interested in reading something else with this author. And then for Egypt, for Invisible Cities, I read Woman at Point Zero by Nawal El-Saadawi, translated by Sharif Hitata. This is a very short book and it packs a punch, to say the least. It's about a young woman. Again, all of these books seem to be about young women and also written by women. And she is, after she leaves her family home, she moves to different locations, to different homes, and is taken in by different people, mostly men. And she is constantly being abused and used in different ways by the people that she meets. And she falls into the home of someone, is mistreated, and then she decides to leave that place in order to look for something better. So this book basically follows her journey in life and trying to find a good life for herself. She is constantly trying to find a way to live by her own rules, and towards the later part of the book she does find that in a way, and then another theme to the book becomes female empowerment, which I really liked. I had a lot of discussions about this book with Nicole, especially in our Discord, and there were a lot of people who shared their thoughts about this book that really added to the way I've been thinking about it since. So I would highly recommend, if you are interested in reading this book, or you're interested in sort of how we as readers approach books, especially from countries where you're maybe getting a particular kind of narrative, I would definitely suggest check out that Discord thread where we shared some of our thoughts. And I know that Nicole has also talked about her feelings about this book, so I will leave her YouTube channel below as well. Nicole from Nicole is Here to Learn, who I love, so I would strongly recommend to check out her videos as well on this book and in general. But yeah, so this book for me, it was very strong. I have some reservations, and that is what we talked about in the Discord. But I feel like in particular what stood out to me was the female empowerment. That is something I definitely appreciated about it. And I think Nawal El-Saadawi is a really strong writer. So I have actually ordered one of her memoirs that I hope to read in the near future. Then I read a Swedish book, so I won't go into depth about it here since it was just released and there's no knowing if there's going to be an English version of this, but it is Glöm allt, inte by Philomène Grandin. This is a memoir about her father, Izzy Young, who had a folk music store in the US. He was born in the US and had this store, and then moved to Sweden in the 1960s. And he is known for having discovered Bob Dylan, which is sort of it's something that also comes up in the memoir, and he has some interaction with other famous artists like Patti Smith as well, and others that I am less familiar with personally. But this book is about Izzy Young as a father. So she talks about her father and their relationship what it was like growing up in the 80s with him as a young child. She also talks about their time in the 2010s, so 2016, especially in 2018, when he has Alzheimer's, and she's trying to and sort of she talks about very candidly about the everyday circumstances that comes up with taking care of someone with Alzheimer's and the ups and downs of that. I thought this memoir was really strong. I think it was honestly portraying her relationship with her father. It's so heartfelt, and it was just everything that I look for in a memoir. It was interesting to see the anecdotes related to the famous artists and stuff like that. But what I read this book for was the father and daughter relationship that was, as I said, really beautifully and also complexly conveyed. So if you do read Swedish, I would urge you to pick this one up. If you don't, then I hope one day it will be translated. It was really good. So there's that. Lastly, I read A Burst of Light and Other Essays by Audrey Lord. This was my first official acquaintance with Audrey Lord, and it was fantastic to finally get to her. A Burst of Light is journal entries where she has just found out that she has cancer, and she's dealing with knowing this information and how it's affecting her in her everyday. And she is very honest in the ups and downs of the sort of the emotional reaction she has to this knowledge, and how she wants to live her life and all those things. So she's very honestly sharing that process with you in A Burst of Light, as well as talking about other things, talking about her politics and her work as well, because it's a journal, it's sort of a mishmash of things. But the other essays in the book, the first half of the book really, cover various different topics, some of them related to race and racism, some of them related to the need for intersectionality and inclusivity in feminism. One of them is about parenting and raising your children to be the kind of people you want to see in the next generation. There's a lot of various things that she discusses, and I think you get a good, clear sense of her political standpoints and why she's become such an important voice and why she has spoken to so many people. I think even though the essays have been published a while ago, they still feel very relevant, and I'm glad to finally have made my acquaintance with her, and I definitely will be reading more from her in the future. This is a very brief book and collection, so I think it was a good introduction to her. And also has a fantastic cover. So I basically just picked this up as a sampler of her work, and it was great for that. So those are all of the books that I read in February and one I finished on the first day of March. Let me know what you read in February, or if you've read any of these books. I would love to hear about that as well. I'm hoping that March will be a very reading successful month. Not in the sense that I need to read a lot of books in terms of quantity, but definitely the time I spend reading. I had a really... in February I was reading, some days I was reading a lot and some days I wasn't reading at all, and I find that tends to affect my mood. I kind of need the reading to wind down, so that is why I know that when I have periods when I'm not reading at all, it usually means that I have a harder time focusing on things, and that is a sign that I'm stressed out or something else. So it's sort of a sign of my state of mind, and so I'm hoping that I can get into a good groove for March. So far so good. So that was all I wanted to say. I hope you are all doing well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon.